Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are taking a look back at an end of summer classic, the 1973 film, American Graffiti. It stars Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard, Paul Lamont, Cindy Williams, Charles Martin Smith, Candy Clark, Mackenzie Phillips, Wolfman Jack, and Harrison Ford. This movie is directed by George Lucas.
When this movie came out, it was denied by almost every major studio, much like some other film that George would make in the future. It had a meager budget of $777,000, but it ended up grossing $140 million. It is one of the most financially successful films ever made. I'm going to put those terms into 2020 money just so our audience gets a really good idea of just how financially successful this film was. That's a $4.5 million budget. Pennies in Hollywood. $816 million box office. Like Marvel money for this movie. It takes place in 1962 Modesto, California, which is George Lucas's hometown. And it really goes over the art of cruising, the concept of cruising along on this last night for two friends before they decide what they're going to do with their adult lives. They're supposed to go off to college in a East Coast town someplace, and we just get to follow them along as they go on it. But don't be confused by all of that storyline. This movie is all about cars. This is a Cars movie. All the other storylines are secondary in my mind. But Matt, what did you think of it?
Well, Randall, this may come as a shock, but I have never seen this movie before until I saw it now.
Say what?
I don't know why I haven't seen this movie, because I really enjoyed this movie a lot. And this is the first movie I've ever seen of, like, cruising and stuff. This is part of culture, history, Americana that I really didn't have any exposure to before. So to me, this was like jumping into this new world or whatever for the first time. I actually had to go up to my mom and I'm like, Mom, did you guys really do this where you guys just cruise around, hop into cars to go different places? She's like, yeah. To me, it was all something new. And I really enjoyed this film. All I knew about it going into this was Harrison Ford was in it and that George Lucas directed it. That's really all I knew about this film.
I am legitimately shocked that you had never seen. I would never have thought for a second that it's a George Lucas film that Matt hadn't seen. Not to mention it's American Graffiti, for God's sakes.
I'm kind of a big deal.
I love this movie. And like I said, it's a car film. Like this is a movie about cars. Yes, there is the storylines, and there are a lot of other things going on with the kind of almost hookup culture of the 1950s and early 60s. But really, there's so much in here that is just heart-thumping car stuff. I mean, one of our characters, Dreyfuss's character, what he does, he drives a Citroen 2CV. I mean, the cars in this, the T-Bird, the Ford Model A that's been then cut and made into a hot rod, the classic cars, the Volkswagen Beetles, everything in here. It's nuts, This is a fantastically fun film to take a look back at, not just for the culture, but for anyone who loves that era and wants to go relive it. And it's kind of like the 20-year nostalgia cycle because it was made in 1973, but it's really George Lucas looking back on his childhood, or well, his coming of age himself.
Like I said, I love the cars. I wouldn't be able to name the cars like you would, but yes, they are front and center. That and like the music, the whole time you're listening to oldies music from the 60s and 50s and stuff. So you get all that, and a big character in this film, Wolfman Jack, he's the radio DJ kind of thing.
The Wolfman is everywhere.
So it's almost like you're listening along to the music that all the cars are listening to throughout the whole time. The people that are riding in their different cars. It seems like everyone is tuned in to this one station, and just adds to the atmosphere and stuff of this film. And, even though they may not be as much of the focus, some of the characters, but I think the characters are well done too. I enjoyed the characters. I like the showing, the different groups and stuff. It's not like one group that's together this whole time and we find out about this one group. These friends split off and they're doing different stuff. They're going on their own little trips in their cars and stuff. And you're learning more about these characters through their interactions on this one night, kind of thing. But at the same time, too, a lot of these movies we see, like, everything gets, like, pushed into, like, one night. This actually feels like, this could be, like, a one-night thing.
Yes. This movie feels like it could be encapsulated inside of this one night that it takes place in. Unlike some films where everything is like, wow, that's supposed to take place in a day? There's no way you could fit that much in a day. Not this one. And you're right, though. Like, our two main characters, Kurt and Steve, they meet up and they're like, hey, I don't know if I want to go to college. I kind of like it here. I have a life here. All my friends are here.
After all we went through to get accepted, we're finally getting out of this turkey town, and now you want to crawl back into your cell, right?
And they go off and they do their own things, exactly like you said. And that is so different from what you see in so many films where the main characters are almost always sticking together. It almost kind of reminds me a little bit of Lord of the Rings, or Lord of the Rings more like reminds me of this. But, like, you don't keep everyone together. The fellowship breaks apart. Well, in this, the vast majority of the time is spent with the main characters not interacting with one another. And they start interacting, they go do their own things, and then at the end they get back together and they go their separate ways. It's a very different take on how a movie is made, which is not surprising given that it's George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola behind this film. And really, without Francis Ford Coppola, this film never gets made because George Lucas had trouble making... This is a follow-up to THX,
Well, it's during THX where they worked together, where Coppola told Lucas, like, hey, you should write something based on your childhood and stuff. That's a movie that you should do. And Lucas had a lot of problems and stuff with the studio and stuff to actually get this movie made and put to theaters. At one time, they wanted to make this like a direct-to-TV movie kind of thing, or a made-for-TV kind of movie. And Coppola was really in Lucas's corner the whole time. Like, no, we need, even if I have to foot the bill and pay for the $777,000 budget or whatever to get this movie to theaters as opposed to TV, that's something I want to do. So it's a good thing that Coppola and Lucas eventually won out, that it was able to get to theaters so, people could enjoy this movie and that it's got the success, that it's experienced.
And this scene's got... I'd say this scene. Whoop. Marker. This movie does have some scenes that I just have no choice but to smile at. I know they're coming up. Like, I know what's going to happen with the police car. But really, for me, the scenes that make the film aren't even necessarily the main characters. My scenes that really do make this film for me is John and Carol, because there's no sexual tension between them. He was cruising for a girl, and what happens, he gets this young girl that he knows is too young for him, and that he's not going to go near. So those scenes between them are fun. She's kind of a brat, and... almost a little bit of a jerk, and he's just like trying to get out of this situation this entire night. And really, they have some of the most fun scenes. Like, yeah, I know that the cops car scene's coming up and I know it's going to happen, but I if you haven't seen the movie in a while, you're kind of like, huh, that's right, that ridiculously fun situation that they're put into where there is no love story, there is no drama, it's just these two in this kind of awkward scenario that they're in.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. I love John and Carol in this film. Just for people who haven't seen it, like John, he's almost like someone you'd see like right out of Grease. He's got the white shirt with his cigarettes, tied up in his sleeve, and he's the one that's driving the nice hot rod, and he's got this reputation of being the fastest.
He's never lost, Matt.
He's never lost. He's never lost. And Harrison Ford's character throughout this whole film is trying to catch up with him so that they can race, so that Harrison Ford can prove that he's the new fastest person in town. But yeah, it's real interesting when Carol first gets in the car, right before she gets in the car, he was talking to some other girl in the front seat of another car and asked if anyone would come, and they said, so-and-so's sister will hop in with you. He's like, sister, mother, I don't care,
I don't
Either one,
care.
they'll come in. And he didn't realize until she actually got in the car that it's like, man, how old are you?
I'm old enough. How old are you?
I'm too old for you.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. You think he's the older guy and stuff, and you think maybe he's holding her captive, but it's the opposite. She has him held captive throughout it. Anytime he wants to start and, like drop her off, or when the cop comes.
Good, a cop. I'm gonna tell him you tried to rape me.
Oh, no.
Past
Hey.
curfew, I'm gonna tell him how old I am. My parents don't know I'm out, and you tried to rape me.
Yeah, it was shady.
Boy, are you up a creek.
Come on, really, Carol, now don't say anything.
So she's got him captive. She's just looking to have fun, someone to have fun, show her a good time kind of thing that she doesn't often get to experience. She talks about her father being a bit overbearing, never lets her go out and do anything. So she's holding this John hostage or whatever so that she can have a good time.
That's not to say that every scene has aged particularly well. There are definitely scenes in here that, for lack of a better term, probably would have been done differently today. One of our main characters, Steve, who's out with his girl, and she flat out tells him no, and he's just, they don't do anything. He stops, but the insinuation is there that if he wanted to, there's nothing she could do about it. And I guess from some perspective, it's like, yeah, that was kind of the case in the late 50s and early 60s, but it doesn't make it any more comfortable watching it today.
Well, that, like you said, he stopped. He was trying to convince her to have sex with him, but she went, she wasn't into it. Like, she wasn't doing anything. And then he realized, like, no, he's like, I don't want to do that.
Well, earlier, the same characters, they're at the dance, and he's like, I want to dance. And he has this, the sound in his voice is like, you have to dance with me because I want to dance,
Go ahead, slug me, scar my face. I wouldn't dance with you if you were the last guy up in this gym.
This is getting good.
Come on, Eddie, I'll dance with you. You don't mind, do you, Peggy?
She puts him in his place then, and she kind of puts him in his place at this scene too, where they're trying to get frisky, because she ends up kicking him out of the car because it's her car.
Get out of my car! Get out! Ori! I told you never to mention that!
Yeah, you deserve that. Because you've been acting like a jerk all night to her.
That's one thing. We were looking at the two characters that we were talking about, Kirk and Steve being the two main characters. Kirk's the guy that he doesn't know that he wants to go to college. He's thinking like, you know what, maybe I want to stay here. And his whole arc through the movie is trying to discover like, well, what is it that he wants to do? And then Steve is like the opposite. Steve can't talk enough about leaving. He wants to leave. And, he's dating Kurt's sister right now. There's a scene where you think maybe he's going to propose to her, but instead he tells her that
seeing other people while I'm away can't possibly hurt,
And of course, she doesn't take well to that at all. Yeah, it's definitely kind of an interesting thing, and you see, like, Steve's arc going the opposite from, like, Kirk's, like, wanting to absolutely leave and then coming around to maybe wanting to stay.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So throughout this night, Steve discovers that even though he really wants to get out of town, he has a life here. He's going steady with a girl that he really loves and that she really loves him. And maybe he shouldn't go off to an East Coast college town. But Kurt's kind of figuring out, hey, you know what? Like, I have friends here, but really my future might not be here. And they completely switch throughout the night. Like, who's going and who doesn't. And you get to see that. But that's the very end. There is one scene that we have to talk about before then. We absolutely have to talk about it because is it even a car movie without a drag race?
No,
I mean,
no.
Finally, Harrison Ford's character catches up to John, and he says, "We need to have a race. We need to have a race." And they have a short race, kind of just like on the street, not a real legit drag race, but just a short race. And Harrison Ford kind of just pulls through, and he runs the red light and everything. And you find out later that John was just like sizing it up, because he goes and he takes off any of the restrictions he has on his car for the actual drag race at the end of the film. And they have a race, this kind of classic versus new, just going balls to the wall. And it's exciting. You don't really know what's going to happen if you haven't seen it. You're like, oh, you know what? They've been talking this guy up. They've been talking John up this entire film, but really there's a fast car there, on the other side. So it's fun and it's exciting, and it's still intense to watch, even when, if you've seen it, you know what's going to happen. So I'm super happy with the drag race at the end, and I'm even more happy that Harrison Ford's character loses.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
Long story short, if you love car culture, especially classic car culture, you really haven't seen a car movie quite like this, probably. You should, if you haven't seen it.
Oh, I totally agree. This was the first time I saw it. I really like this movie. I highly recommend you give it a check. Look out. Be sure to check it out to see if you're going to like it too. What do you guys think? If you guys have already seen this movie, what do you think about American Graffiti? Let Randall and I know in the comments below. If you like our review, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to get notifications about when our other videos are coming out. And be sure to check out our Facebook page. We'll post a day before our videos come out to let you know what video's coming out next. For now, I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day.
And I'm Randall here in Texas. See everyone later.
Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.